She didn't even hesitate. The sound of the slap echoed through the narrow cabin like a gunshot. Passengers froze mid-sentence. The pregnant black woman in seat 14C held her cheek, her eyes wide in disbelief. Her lips trembled, her hand gently covering her baby bump as though shielding her unborn child from the chaos. All she had done was politely ask for assistance. Now her world had shifted, and everyone on that flight knew it. Before we go further, if you're watching our video for the first time, you're highly welcome to Elliot Stories. Please comment which part of the world you're watching us from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is a banger you'll never want to miss. The flight attendant's name was Karen. Yes, Karen. Her reputation wasn't a secret. She was infamous across multiple crews for her sharp tongue and holier-than-thou attitude. Her seniority and pristine record somehow gave her a free pass to be rude, especially to those she felt didn't belong in first class, or anywhere they hadn't, in her mind, earned. The flight had taken off from Dallas, heading to New York. Full cabin. Full crew. All eyes were now glued to the aftermath of what had just happened. Karen had already stepped back like nothing happened. "Next time, don't raise your voice at me," she snapped, before walking briskly down the aisle. But she hadn't raised her voice. Not once. The woman in red, who we'll call Amora for now, was alone, visibly pregnant, and elegantly dressed in a crimson maternity dress under a black blazer. Her hair was neat, skin glowing, posture graceful. She had the quiet strength of someone used to being underestimated. But that slap had rattled her, visibly. A man across the aisle unbuckled and stood. "That was assault," he muttered, taking out his phone. Another woman nearby said, "Did anyone else hear what she just said to that poor lady?" Whispers erupted like wildfire. One elderly couple shook their heads, clearly appalled. A junior flight attendant hurried over. Her badge read Maria. She knelt beside Amora and whispered, "I am so sorry, please, don't panic, we'll fix this." But Amora didn't say a word. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just sat there, breathing slowly, hand on her belly. Up in first class, a tall, salt-and-pepper-haired man sat tense, his eyes closed. His assistant leaned over. "Sir, is that your wife?" He opened his eyes slowly. "Yes," he replied, standing immediately. But he didn't rush back. He walked calmly, his expensive loafers muffled against the carpet. When he reached row 14, he bent down beside Amora and took her hand. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, still silent. Karen was called to the back by the captain. A formal report was being drafted by crew leads already. Someone had tipped them off that the situation was spiraling fast. Maria, the junior attendant, noticed the tall man comforting Amora. Her eyes widened. She whispered to the co-pilot, "I think that's Richard Michaels." The Richard Michaels. The CEO of Altavia Airlines. In that moment, the plane's atmosphere shifted again. Karen returned from the front with the same arrogant energy she always carried, until she spotted him. Her step slowed. Her lips parted slightly. "Sir, I didn't know you were on this flight," she stammered, already backtracking. Richard didn't even look at her. Instead, he turned to Maria. "Can I speak to the captain immediately, please?" Maria nodded and vanished toward the cockpit. Karen panicked. "Sir, it was a misunderstanding. She was being difficult. I didn't know she—" "You didn't need to know who she was," Richard interrupted sharply. "You needed to treat her like a human being. Something I'm not sure you're qualified to do." Karen swallowed hard. "I want you off this flight before we land," he continued. "You'll be debriefed at HQ." Passengers who had been quiet suddenly murmured in agreement. Some clapped softly. But Richard wasn't done. He looked at the assistant pilot who had now returned. "I want a written report from every witness on this plane before we land. She struck a pregnant woman. That's not just unprofessional. That's dangerous." Karen finally looked shaken. She turned and left without another word. Back in her seat, Amora finally spoke. "I'm all right," she whispered. "Let's not escalate it further." Richard squeezed her hand. "This isn't about escalation. It's about accountability." The captain came over and offered a formal apology. He even gave Amora the option to press charges immediately upon landing. But Amora simply asked to be left alone for the rest of the flight. Passengers kept their eyes on her, not with pity, but admiration. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't retaliated. Yet her grace under pressure screamed louder than anything else on board. By the time the flight landed in New York, Karen was escorted off the aircraft. No uniform. No dignity. Just silence and consequences. But the real surprise, that was still loading. By the time Karen stepped off the plane, escorted quietly by airport security at JFK, her heart was racing. She had never experienced this level of humiliation. A suspension was almost certain, but she still believed that once she explained herself to HR, things would blow over. She still didn't fully grasp who Amora was. Meanwhile, Richard and Amora were ushered into a private VIP lounge. It wasn't for show, it was standard protocol for executive-level staff. But Amora, ever calm, insisted they keep things low-key. She didn't want press or pity. What she wanted was clarity. Richard glanced at her. "Still want to go home, or should we go straight to the board meeting?" "I'll go," Amora said, sipping her water. "I'm already dressed for it." That same morning, a quarterly board meeting had been scheduled at Altavia Airlines headquarters, barely 45 minutes away from JFK. The irony. Karen had been transferred to that very hub last month, still on probation after multiple crew complaints. At the boardroom, tension hung in the air. Executives were already aware that the CEO had witnessed a serious in-flight incident. No one expected him to walk in with his pregnant wife, and certainly not one who had just been assaulted by an employee. As Amora walked into the sleek glass conference room in her red dress and black blazer, every board member stood. Not because she demanded it, because they knew her. She wasn't just the CEO's wife. She was Dr. Amora Michaels, a highly respected medical researcher, part-time legal advisor for Altavia's Aviation Safety Board, and recently appointed non-executive board consultant. Karen. She had no idea. Just as the meeting was about to start, Richard made a brief call to HR. "Bring Karen Jenkins to boardroom C." "Yes. Now." Karen walked in 5 minutes later, confused and still defiant. Her hair was tied back. Her expression was an odd blend of arrogance and fear. But as soon as she saw Amora seated at the long mahogany table, surrounded by executives, her knees buckled slightly. You're here," she whispered. Richard didn't flinch. "Karen, you are in this room because we believe in due process. But we also believe in accountability." Karen looked around. "I didn't know who she was." "That's exactly the problem," Amora said, her voice calm but piercing. "You assumed who I wasn't." Gasps echoed softly in the room. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. "I was polite," Amora continued, "but you were triggered by my presence. You didn't see a passenger. You saw a problem." One board member, a woman named Diane, leaned forward. "Karen, we've received 6 separate passenger written statements and 2 internal crew reports. Would you like to revise your version of events before we go further?" Karen trembled. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. I thought she was." "Exactly," Diane cut in. "You thought. You didn't observe, you didn't listen, and worst of all, you acted violently." Another executive added, "If this woman were anyone else, without this visibility, you'd have gotten away with it." Again. Karen broke. "I made a mistake. Please. I need this job." Amora looked at her, eyes soft but firm. "You didn't just disrespect me. You humiliated me, in front of strangers, while I carried life inside me. And now you're asking for grace you've never given anyone else." Karen began to cry, but no one moved to console her. Consequences had come home. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for misconduct," Richard said, standing. "And this incident is being turned over to legal. You'll be officially terminated, with charges pending for assault. But more importantly, your name will be added to the no-hire list across all partnering carriers." Karen collapsed into a seat, sobbing. Amora stood slowly and turned to the board. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to remind us what kind of company we promise to be. Let this be a lesson that policy isn't enough. Culture matters. We need training, we need listening sessions, and we need real inclusion, not tokenism." The room clapped. A month later, Karen's name trended briefly after a leaked employee termination notice went public. Some people online tried to paint her as the victim. But when the cabin footage and the testimonies surfaced, the internet turned. Her slap had made it to headlines, but so had the dignity of the woman she struck. Amora never made a public statement. She didn't need to. She continued her advisory work and gave birth to a healthy baby girl 6 months later. The Altavia staff named one of their new HR initiatives after her, the Amora Standard, a company-wide inclusion and empathy training program. Karen moved back in with her sister in Florida. She never worked in aviation again. But the true victory wasn't about the punishment, it was about the culture shift. Employees started standing up for passengers more. Junior staff found their voices. And silent passengers, like those on row 15 that day, learned something powerful. Doing nothing in the face of injustice makes you complicit. Moral lesson. Real power isn't about position, it's about principle. Respect is not something people should have to earn through titles or wealth. It should be extended because they are human. Always treat others with the dignity you hope to receive, even when no one is watching. A word from Elliot Stories. You never know who someone really is, or the strength they carry behind their silence. Never judge by what you see on the surface. Tomorrow's story will shake you even more, so stay subscribed, stay thoughtful, and remember, grace is free, but respect is earned through character. See you next time.